Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here for this roundtable on the current state and future of public media in Alaska. My name is Gretchen Gordon. I'm the general manager here at KUAC FM and TV in Interior Alaska, Fairbanks, Alaska, to be precise. We have an incredible mix of registrants today. 316 of you from all across the state. So from Palmer, Soldotna, North Pole, Juneau, Anchorage, Dillingham, Sitka, Fairbanks, Nenana, Salcha, Homer, Denali Park, and Girdwood, and many other places throughout Alaska. And we're joined by friends who are tuning in from outside too, from places like Roanoke, Virginia, Bloomington, Indiana, and even Fargo, North Dakota. And very many more. So thank you very much. Your presence reflects how far Alaska's stories travel and how much this conversation matters beyond our borders. Over the next hour, we're going to talk candidly about what's working and what's at risk, sustaining trusted local journalism, strengthening emergency and public safety communications in the farthest flung communities, ensuring children's educational content is accessible everywhere Alaskans live, and preparing our systems and stations for what's next, technologically, financially, and culturally. We'll also touch on our partnerships between stations, with tribal and rural communities, with schools and universities, and with our national networks. All together can help us do more together than any one station can do alone. A quick bit of housekeeping. We are recording today's session. Please drop questions in the chat as they occur to you, and we'll address them in the Q&A portion of our discussion. Our aim is simple: keep Alaskans informed, connected, educated, and safe now and for the next generation. With that, it's my pleasure to begin our conversation and introduce our featured guest, PBS President and CEO, Paula Kerger. Paula Kerger is President and Chief Executive Officer of PBS, the nation's largest non-commercial media organization, representing more than 330 member stations throughout the country. She is the longest serving president and CEO in PBS history. Over 19 years, Paula has led the transformation of PBS from a broadcaster to a multi-platform digital media organization, which delivers on public television's essential mission of education, inspiration, and service to the American public. Each year, 58% of U.S. television households watch PBS, and each month, PBS reaches over 36 million adults on linear primetime television, more than 15 million users on PBS-owned streaming platforms, and garners nearly 43 million impressions on social media. Programs on PBS are consistently recognized with the industry's most prestigious honors, including Peabody, Emmy, and Alfred I. DuPont Columbia University Awards. Under Kerger's leadership, PBS has deepened its impact from providing universal access to early learning resources through the PBS Kids broadcast and streaming channels, to empowering educators with digital resources through PBS Learning Media. In the 23-24 school year, 17 million users visited PBS Learning Media, averaging 1.7 million users per month. Kerger also serves as the president of the PBS Foundation, which provides a significant source of revenue for projects that benefit the entire public television system. We're so fortunate to have Paula at the helm of PBS. I know she is the right leader for this moment. Welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Gretchen. It's so wonderful to be with you and to be with everyone across Alaska. A few years ago, I had a wonderful trip. I only managed to make it to Anchorage and Juneau, so clearly I have to come back and spend more time. And it was just an extraordinary time. So I'm just really glad to be here with Gretchen and Ed and Kristen and Justin, and to talk a little bit about this battle that we've just been through, as well as what we're looking at as we look to the future. First of all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the support that you give to public media in Alaska. But thank you also for your many efforts as we waged what now feels like an epic battle to try to save public media. We certainly gave it our all, and we certainly made it a much more difficult effort than I think many people thought it would be. I know that many of you took time to write and call your senators and your member of Congress, and you joined millions of people across the country who came forward with letters, with phone calls, with texts. And I have to say, Alaska was really at the center of so much of the discussions that we had through this period. And I am so deeply grateful to Senator Michalski, who really fought for us more than any other member of Congress or senator. Senator Michalski stands head and shoulders above everyone else. I also want to recognize Ed. Ed Ullman was a great partner. Ed, in addition to his day job, also serves on the PBS board. And earlier this year, I was called to testify before the DOJ committee. This is the committee that's chaired by Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I thought pretty hard about who should represent all of our stations, who could tell the most compelling case about the importance of public media and the role that it plays in communities. And I called Ed a little embarrassed and said, look, you can say no to this, because sometimes when you go to testify in front of these hearings, it doesn't go well. But he said, I'm all in. And it was really, he did an extraordinary job in talking about the role that public media plays across the state of Alaska. If anything, I leave you with any other message from today, I just want to say that although we were disappointed with the outcome of the federal appropriation, we are not giving up. We are not going anywhere. And I would say that actually having gone through this battle over the last months, I can say it just underscores for me more than ever the importance of the work we do. And I've heard from so many people across the country, including many Alaskans who have told us the importance of our work. I think in many ways, Alaska serves as an inspiration for all of us across the country. Public media in Alaska has been defined by the remarkable efforts of the great people who work in the various station teams. They all lean on each other. They look at ways to maximize resources and to connect all Alaskans with news and information, emergency services, and of course, award-winning storytelling. And I often point to the work of the stations here as really the best example of what public media can be at its very best. And truly the work in Alaska is an inspiration for all of our other stations across the country as they look for ways to not only share services, but to learn from one another. And this is experience that in this state you can see has been developed over the years. In 2015, the state funding was cut significantly, and Juneau and Bethel, they came together with Ed in Anchorage and figured out a way that we were going to bring the signal across the state. Your work touches so far beyond the borders of the state. Now, of course, we all love Molly of Denali. And I actually smile every time I say it, because it is not only an extraordinary children's series, but it's one that I think so beautifully captures what we do in public media at our very best. Is we work with local storytellers to bring great stories forward. And Alaska Public Media was really one of the very first, if not the first, stations that came up with and worked with us on creating a digital-only series, not just for Alaska, but for the rest of us through PBS Digital Studios. And it was a series called Indie Alaska, which has gotten a very big audience, I know within Alaska, but across the country. And it captures just the extraordinary life of people across the state. And I think, again, this is what public media does so best. Most people don't really understand us. They think that we're like every network. There has to be some person somewhere that, runs a national enterprise and tells everyone what to do. We're the opposite of that. In public media, all of our stations, as you know, are independent. They're all locally owned. They're all locally operated. They're locally governed. And the programming that PBS shares with the rest of the country comes up from our stations. And so we are the exact opposite. We are very much a bottom-up type of organization. And to have the opportunity to really tap into the great storytelling, which is so much at the heart of what is Alaska, is just hugely powerful. So where do we go from here? Obviously, this wasn't just a big disappointment. It's a very difficult moment for public broadcasting to contemplate the elimination of federal funding. I've always proudly pointed to the fact that I think we're the most successful public-private partnership that has existed. We take a very small amount of federal money, and we leverage that by raising money locally across the country. And we've built something that is a true public service. And so, I've been in public media a very long time. Some of you who've been around for a long time may remember years ago, Newt Gingrich had recommended what he called the Contract with America, and there were a number of recommendations in it. And one of it was to reduce and eventually eliminate federal funding for public media. And he envisioned doing that over a 3-year period. What has just happened to us basically eliminates the funding over a 3-month period. And so there actually is quite a lot of work that is underway to figure out how do we close those gaps. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about some of the work that's underway. Separate from that, for many years, actually for 30 years, we have also received support out of the Department of Education to support the development of children's content, as well as the research that goes along with it. That work really helps us to ensure that the programming that we're creating, which is designed to give every child the opportunity to enter school for the first time, understanding the basic skills that they need to succeed, not only as they begin to navigate their way through school, but also eventually through life. And so the partnership with the Department of Education has been a hugely important piece of that. That funding was eliminated in May, and literally with no notice. On May 1st, we received a letter that basically said, the program is over, stop spending money, you're done. And so we began to work very quickly with our producers. Fortunately, in television, you're usually working pretty far ahead in developing kids' content. We were able to get a few funders to help us finish out some of the projects that we had in development. And now we're working with a series of individuals and foundations that are helping us look at how we can develop new kids' content moving forward. We had a lot of new kids programs that were already produced for this coming season. In fact, we just premiered a brand new series yesterday, which has been a dream project of Al Roker called Weather Hunters. And it's loosely based on his family and his daughter specifically, who is a absolute science geek following in her dad's footsteps. And so I think, I don't want you to worry that all the children's programming is going away or somehow it's not going to be at the same quality level as it is. We have a lot of content that we've produced, including some new episodes of Molly of Denali, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And so we do have a little bit of time to try to figure that out. But I think that what we have been most concerned about is the impact that this cut in funding, this immediate cut in funding, is going to have, particularly on small rural stations. And in fact, it was thinking about that led me to think about Ed when he came to testify, because I think, again, this is an example here in Alaska of just the outsized influence that public media has in many communities across the state. I've been working with a group. In fact, right before I came onto this call, I was just on the phone with the guy who is responsible for pulling together resources from a number of foundations and other donors. You may have heard there's been some mention of it in the press, and their focus is specifically on helping the stations who are most at risk in this interim period. And I will tell you, there is a lot of focus on Alaska. Everyone is aware that both the public television and the public radio stations in the state are of profound importance. The Native American radio stations as well, very important service, and those are the stations that are going to have the highest priority in terms of that funding. Now, one of the things that, as I started working with these funders to put what we're calling a bridge fund together, is their immediate assumption that this was $1 billion problem, because this is how this was talked about in the press, that that $1 billion was going to be clawed back to return to the taxpayers. Actually, $1 billion is a 2-year appropriation for public media, and that's all public television and all of public radio. We had gotten advance funding for 2 years, and so that's the money that was pulled back. And when you begin to sort of piece it apart, the amount of money that we need to raise particularly to help the most vulnerable stations, it's a smaller number. And so the group of foundations that came together, led by Knight Foundation and also Ford Foundation, MacArthur, Robert Wood Johnson, and others, has already raised what's closing on $50 million that will go against the needs of the most vulnerable stations. And they have raised a combination of grant money as well as money that can be used for lower, very no interest loans, which also then will become a replenishing source of support that can be extended for others. They're also working to put together some advisory services to work with stations who are looking for help in building out longer-term sustainability plans. So I think all of that is to say, I'm getting into a lot of detail on this, but all of that is to say is that there is a lot of activity right now underway as we look at this larger problem to sort of break it apart into smaller pieces and figure out how we're going to address each one. And this is the piece most relevant. Of course, the other thing is a number of stations, and I know this is also the case here in Alaska, people are stepping forward, and stations are raising money, and a lot of people are looking for, I'm also fielding calls from people who are interested in supporting stations, and many are talking about Alaska. So again, I think you have, I say all of this because I want you to know that there are a lot of people that are rallying around, and are particularly rallying around you. And we're going to do all we can to make sure that you stay strong. There's also some confusion because there was some news in the press about CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and the fact that it was going away. And I think CPB has been conflated with both PBS and stations. As you know, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is really the entity that was created to distribute federal money to stations. And so it was created as a separate private organization that would receive the federal appropriation and then make sure that it was fairly distributed to stations. So if the federal appropriation goes away, then that makes that less of a needed organization. And whether it fully goes away or if it sunsets for a while or whatever, they're working on figuring out how to unwind that. But I want to be really clear. Your stations are not going away, and we are certainly not going away. And we are really committed to making the hard choices to make sure that we stay strong, we stay resilient, that we're putting the resources in the places that will most value the people that use our services. And we have just gone through at PBS itself a series of staff reductions. We are committed to making sure that we are operating as lean and efficiently as we can. And it's not that we were wasting money before, not the case, but there are projects that we were doing that we realized that we'll need to put on hold for a while so that we can focus our efforts to make sure that we have a full pipeline of programming that for you to watch and enjoy, programs that you count on, that we have the services available for our stations to make sure that they stay full and robust, and that we're positioned well for the future. And we do have a lot of great programming coming up. One of the programs that we're very excited about for this year is our partnership with Ken Burns. He's done a 12-hour series on the American Revolution that will premiere in November, as we look towards 2026 and the country's celebration of the Declaration of Independence. We think it's important to bring forward his documentary that really does give us a sense of the improbability of this democracy that we all treasure, and how that was put together. It was messy at the beginning. It is certainly messy now. It was fragile at the beginning. It feels fragile now. And the responsibility that each of us have, I think in part is informed by understanding how it came together and how we came to be. And so I think that when we began working with this, on this with Ken 10 years ago, I thought this would be an important film. It would be an important moment. I remember the bicentennial. I remember the bicentennial minutes. I remember I grew up outside of Baltimore. I remember going to Fort McHenry and watching the fireworks on the 4th of July. But I didn't really take away anything more than that I can remember. Now, I was a kid at the time, but it felt to me, it feels to me, felt to me 10 years ago, and it definitely feels to me now that part of the importance of a milestone is to use it as a point of grounding, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. I mentioned Weather Hunters, and I mentioned briefly Molly of Denali. The new season 5 will debut in November, and we're looking forward to yet another season of the great programs. This 5th season is especially strong because it really showcases the Native voices and Native stories from actually not just Alaska, but across the country. We're premiering an episode called Molly's Epic Adventure, which is a little mini series within the series where Molly and Grandpa Nate travel to 5 different locations to look at ancient volcanoes in New Jersey. That surprised me a little bit. Idaho, Oregon, New Mexico, and one more obvious, Hawaii. And in their adventure, they meet local indigenous tribes in each location and learn about their culture and their relationship with volcanoes, which, as you know, is an element of the series itself. Each story is going to feature new characters and just really beautiful animation. I'm really it's beautiful, and I'm really excited to share it with audiences. We have a lot of other content. I skipped over the adult content quickly. I mentioned American Revolution, but we have a new upcoming season of Nature. And the first season, the first show in the season is a production that focuses on walruses and extinction, created by the Nature team and working with Kirk Johnson, who is runs the National Museum of Natural History here in Washington. And for him, walruses are an especially important animal. And as we look at the issues of our natural surroundings, their story is a really compelling one. It is beautifully shot. We have a great season of drama coming up. We are obviously bringing back All Creatures Great and Small. We have a new series, a new remaking of the Forsyte saga called The Forsytes. Just a lot of great content that is coming up, and we're really excited to be sharing it with you. I'm really also very proud of the work that, as I said at the very beginning of my comments, that stations are doing in really rallying support. Ed's going to talk a little bit later about the work being done by the Voices Across Alaska Fund, created by the Alaska Community Foundation. It is gratifying to see so many people are stepping up. In our last pledge drive in August, the contributions were up significantly. And I will tell you, people are calling in and making their contributions around Ken Burns' work, NewsHour, and Masterpiece. 3 core series, not necessarily the music shows or any of the shows that normally are so popular during our fundraising drives. And to me, that just reminds us that people support us because they care about what we do each and every day. We have a foundation in Gretchen's very nice but overlong introduction. Thanks, Gretchen. She mentioned that I'm also the president of the PBS Foundation. And when I'm not focused on the Bridge Fund, I've been focused on really also talking to funders about funding some of our core series. And we've had some good success already, including a significant gift for the NewsHour. So I really feel pretty optimistic going forward because I see that people are coming together and rallying. I know that no one wanted to be in the position that we're in right now, but I also know that as a system, we're extraordinarily resilient. And I also believe that it's times like this that people really do come together and they focus and they look at new opportunities and they think about things a little differently. I think of some of the things we did during COVID. We did a lot of work directly in classrooms, and we did things like Zoom calls that we put on television that people thought would never work and never be possible. And now oftentimes I watch the news and I see what's clearly a Zoom call that is, which we never would have tried before. It allows us to bring storytelling deeper and wider. So not all of the results of circumstances like this are negative ones. But I'm a realist, and I also know that it's going to require a lot of work, and we're going to require all of us coming together. And I mentioned at the front end of my remarks that Alaska has always been such a great model for the work that we did in public broadcasting, nimble, really paying attention to the needs of communities, really thinking about those things that are important and making sure that those are shared, really making sure that we're elevating all voices and making sure that we are reaching all people. And I think that this kind of commitment is profoundly important. I feel especially called to figuring out how we continue to serve our country's children, as not only with content that gives them the basic skills of reading and math, but a lot of those basic skills that Fred Rogers taught us at the very beginning of public media, where he helped every child realize that they're important just the way they are, and making sure that children feel that excited about the world around them and excited about learning. That's again why Ma Lived Denali is such an extraordinary series, because it encourages all children to look around them and look at the world around them and to recognize that there's so much out there that they can be part of. So I look forward to continuing to work with all of you. I look forward to my next visit to Alaska. And when we get to the question part, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the work that we have ahead. And with that, I think I'm turning this over to Ed, if I'm not mistaken.
You are. And thank you so much, Paula, for joining us this evening. Late for you, but I know for how tireless and how committed to the cause of public television and all of public broadcasting Paula Kerger has been. I started at KNME in Albuquerque, New Mexico about the time Paula's the only president and CEO of PBS I've ever known throughout my career. And we couldn't, as Gretchen said, couldn't have selected a finer individual. It's just been extraordinary, the work that she has led all of us across the system, and I'm honored to be a part of it. I just want to talk briefly about what happened for Alaska Public Media. As many of you know, we operate the statewide news network in partnership with 26 other public radio stations across the state. You all know Lori Townsend, I'm certain. Unfortunately for us on the CPB side, it was over $1 million that we lost for our television, what we call the community service grant. And so we put on pause as we're trying to raise funds, Alaska Insight, which was a program seen all across Alaska for the most part. And fortunately, on the radio side, we took less of a hit. The total amount that Alaska Public Media has lost, about 1.49 million. That also included the end of our Ready to Learn grant. And it was the Molly of Denali program that really positioned Alaska Public Media to get back into the education space in a way that we had never done before. And we did 6 years of extraordinary work. And unfortunately, another casualty of losing the federal funding is that we're just not going to be able to do that. Now, we made a commitment because we had funders that were supporting that work, and we're completing all of our contracts and working with all of our community partners here in the Anchorage area. But many of you might not know that in addition to what Gretchen will talk about, what they've done up in the northern part of our state, Stephanie McFadden, our Ready to Learn director, was all over the state. She went to Bethel, she went to Juneau, she went to communities in places all across the state. And unfortunately, that work will not continue until we can find the dollars to do that. So we've pulled back on public affairs. We're worried about debate for the state. We know that we've got elections coming up, and we know that you count on these partnerships, especially with KTOO and Gavel and the work that we do so that all of our debates are statewide. I also want to share with you, so 1.49 million is what we lost in what we call our community service grant. The other thing that is at risk, and we've yet to hear the details from our friends at CPB, who we all have a great amount of compassion for with their challenges and what they're doing to wind things down there, is that we're still waiting to hear about $500,000 for the Alaska desk, which is a new regional journalism collaborative that we started about a year ago. And the goal of that program was to have 4 rural reporters in places where we hadn't had reporters before, at radio stations like Unalaska and Sandpoint. And so that is something that's also at risk. So when we add it all up, just for Alaska Public Media, it's about a $2 million potential funding gap. Now, on the CPB side of it, we have recovered a little over 50% of that. And I want to thank all of you out there who are making those donations. We're fortunate here in the Anchorage Borough, the Matsu Borough, and the Kenai Peninsula to have a lot of people that live in this region who love us dearly and are supporting us. And we're not done with that work yet. But I also want to share with you just an example of how we work to ensure that television is available across the state. This is the Alaska Rural Communications Service Map. It features 100 communities all across the state that rely on the satellite service the state pays for at about $600,000 a year. They give us a very small amount to operate it. We do this efficiently. And all of those communities not only have KKM, but they have 360 television that Justin will talk about. They have access to Gavel to Gavel. They have a variety station where we work with the commercial stations who allow us to rebroadcast programs from their channels. That's ABC, CBS, Fox, the like. And the communities vote on what they would like to see. And then UAF has an education channel that Gretchen and her team oversee as well. And that's on that service, as well as public radio. So we're committed to ensuring that public television and public radio are all across our state. It's not going to be easy. The entire lift is about $15 million. I'm going to hand it off to Gretchen, but we do have some good news. The Voices Across Alaska campaign is in partnership with Alex McKay and the Alaska Community Foundation. We just learned today that we've raised a little over $3.5 million in addition to the funds that each of us are raising independently. And you heard Paula talk about the national initiative. So we can do this. We can do this because we're stronger together. And with that, Gretchen, take it away, please.
Thanks, Ed. As I mentioned before, I'm Gretchen Gordon. I'm with KUAC. I'm their general manager, and I thank you all for giving me a few minutes to talk about something that matters deeply to all of us, the current state of public broadcasting. I am not nearly as eloquent a public speaker, so I wrote a bunch of notes. And so if you will allow me to read them, that would be great. For over 50 years, for more than 60 years on FM and for 54 years on TV, KUAC and our sister stations across the state have been more than broadcasters. We've been connectors, linking villages and cities, tribal communities and urban centers, families and classrooms. Public broadcasting in Alaska is not a luxury, it is essential. But today we're in a very difficult moment. Federal funding has been stripped, statewide support has been zeroed out, and for KUAC, university funding has been reduced drastically. For the past 10 years, KUAC has been quietly absorbing these cuts. However, without federal funding, KUAC has had to make even more painful service cuts, shutting down overnight broadcasts, discontinuing channels like World and Create, cutting some national radio programs, and even losing television service in Nenana. We know these changes impact Alaskans' daily lives, whether it's missing a favorite program, losing a nighttime companion, or no longer seeing PBS on the local channel lineup. These are real losses, and KUAC is not alone. Stations across Alaska are grappling with similar shortfalls. To understand why this matters so much, it helps to look at the bigger picture. And as Ed mentioned, and talking about ARCs, public broadcasting in Alaska is a robust, efficient, interconnected system that has been built carefully over decades. We are a complex system made up of complex entities. And one of the best examples of that is the Alaska Rural Communication System, or ARCS. Now, for 20 years, KUAC partnered with Alaska Public Broadcasting, Inc. as the central facility for distributing programming statewide. Now, Alaska Public Media does that. ARCS is not just about getting television into homes in rural and tribal communities. It's about moving content statewide. KUAC uploads programming to the satellite, feeding radio translators in places like Nome, Tok, Eagle, and Bettles. Alaska Public Media in Anchorage provides the best PBS programming to the ARC system. KTOO in Juneau delivers coverage of the Alaska legislature through Gavel, Alaska, and KUAC's University Channel provides Indigenous and First Nations focused programming, reaching not just interior Alaska, but communities across the state. So this system ensures that whether you live in Anchorage or Anaktubet Pass, you have access to trusted information in education and culture. Now, why does this matter? In a state as vast as ours, with communities separated by hundreds of miles of wilderness, public broadcasting is often the only consistent signal that connects us. It's not just entertainment, it's how families receive emergency alerts. It's how students access educational programming. It's how citizens stay informed about their government. And when funding is cut, it doesn't just affect one town or one station, it ripples across the entire statewide system. And the good news is that while the challenges are real, so are the opportunities. And Paula has mentioned opportunities, Ed has mentioned opportunities. In state, we are innovating. Stations are coming together. General managers are meeting twice a week at this point, sharing resources, creating opportunities, and looking for new ways to sustain and expand our services. The Voices Across Alaska Fund at the Alaska Community Foundation was set up just days following the rescission bill and can already boast $3.5 million raised. The Public Media Company's Bridge Fund, you heard Paula talk about that, is working to bridge that gap nationwide for public television and radio. And at KUAC, we are determined to find ways to restore lost programs and services. Across the state, we're working together to secure stable funding, to strengthen our statewide system, and to ensure that Alaskans, no matter where they live, can continue to rely on public broadcasting. The future of public broadcasting in Alaska depends on us being bold, collaborative, and committed, and we are, and we and all of our partners are. So public broadcasting has always been about trust, connection, and service. And with your advocacy and support and your belief in this mission, we'll be able to continue to deliver for Alaskans now and for generations to come, because it's not just what we do, it's who we are. Thank you. I think we are up next to Kristen.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Kristen Hall, General Manager at KYUK in Bethel. And don't worry, Gretchen, I have notes too. We are a joint radio television station serving the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, roughly 22,000 residents, over 75,000 square miles. That's about the size of South Dakota. We are 500 miles west of Anchorage, off the road system. We're the oldest Indigenous governed radio station in the country. We are the bridge between critical information, culture, and connection, daily bilingual news, public safety updates, and local programs that reflect who we are. In true Alaskan spirit, we believe in the power of collaboration and building strong partners and allies to get things done. We truly value our partnerships with our colleagues from this evening, like Alaska Public Media, KUAC, KTOO, and PBS, to provide the very best when it comes to local, statewide, and national programming, from Molly of Denali and the PBS NewsHour to Indy, Alaska, and Gavel, Alaska. We also are working closely with our local partners in the region to ensure we're delivering local programming that truly matters. We may be off the road system, but we're situated along two rivers, and we use them as our highway system. We work closely with Bethel Search and Rescue and the local ice road crew to ensure travelers are able to get around safely throughout the winter months, and more importantly, in the spring, when our rivers begin to melt. The days and weeks leading up to our rivers opening up to boat travel can be incredibly dangerous. And as the sole service provider for the majority of the communities in our region, we play a critical role in delivering the news and information that helps our residents make better, more informed decisions for themselves, their businesses, and their families. You may be familiar with one of our newer series, Arctic Artists, which highlights and profiles local artists and artisans from our region. From basket weavers to beaters and musicians, community members are able to share their stories and talents. One community member actually recently commented she had seen a recent episode and had no idea that her neighbor was so talented. That's the power of public broadcasting. It brings us together. It helps us understand each other and see each other more clearly. We also use our extensive archive to support language proficiency and intergenerational connection. We've repurposed our Waves of Wisdom series from the 1980s as a language learning tool. This is a Yupik series. We've built a website so you can watch episodes from this series, read along to a Yupik transcript, and hover over the words to get the English translation. It's an incredible learning tool that we're really proud of. And another program that's one of my favorites on KYUK is Yupik Word of the Week, an animated series produced entirely by grade school children from the region. It's at the heart of who we are and what we do, because one of our greatest responsibilities is growing our next generation of storytellers, building our region's future communicators, leaders, and journalists. That starts at KYUK, and that is exactly what's at risk today. Following the rescission, we are facing a cut of $1.2 million. For KYUK, that's nearly 70% of our operating funds. We are one of those rural stations in America that you have heard about that would be hit hardest by these cuts. And without immediate intervention or emergency funding support, KYUK will be forced to let go of over half of our staff by the end of the calendar year. We remain committed to serve our audience, continue to provide local news, information, weather, and critical cultural connection, that you can't find anywhere else. But we can't do it alone. In true Alaskan spirit, now is the time that we lean into our Alaskan values of collaboration. And I hope this evening's conversation sparks urgency, enlightenment, and hope to work together to build a bigger community to help to protect these precious local resources.
And next up, we have Justin.
Thank you, Spencer. And thank you, everyone. I'm Justin Showman. I'm President and General Manager at KTOO Public Media. I just want to thank everyone who's attending for your support of your local member stations, for all the advocacy work that was done in the lead up to this moment. As Paula said, we truly gave it our all. And I'm really eternally grateful for all of the work that everyone on this call did, not just the panelists, but every single person who is listening and watching, who contacted our senators, our representative, and just thank you. Some background on KTOO, 360 TV statewide is probably our most known product. Most notably Galveston, Alaska, and our legislative coverage, and then of course KTOO News. But we're actually 3 radio stations in Juneau. We have KTOO News, which is Juneau's largest newsroom, and then we also have 2 music stations, which we're very proud of. Our number 1, 2, and 3 in our market, respectively. So the community really supports what we do here. And we also have a repeater station on Oak Mountain in Juneau, so we reach out the road. And translators in Hoonah and Gustavus. So doing our part to cover all 30,000 residents of Juneau, and then some of our partners who are off the grid or off the system altogether. Our television service launched in 1978, and we started doing legislative coverage in 1995. That first year was a 2-week trial run. Lots of conversations between KTOO and the state of Alaska to get that up and running. But based on that trial run in 1976, we had our first full session of legislative coverage. So, as we look at rescission, we're coming up on a milestone as well. Our 30th year of providing that legislative coverage, and federal funding has always been a really vital component in subsidizing that work. Our most resource-intensive services are our news and then our legislative coverage. I'm really grateful for our partnerships on this call, through working with KYUK, Alaska Public Media, KUAC, and the ARC system. We ensure that the entire state of Alaska always has access to not just the legislature, but also the state Supreme Court. And anything that the executive does, should it happen in Juneau, is broadcast statewide on Galveston, Alaska. And also, we work with other partners in Anchorage, including KTUU. So there are occasional times when we also partner with the commercial side of the broadcasting dial to ensure that if the governor is having a presser in Anchorage, that it's still reaching the entire state via Galveston, Alaska. Television production and transmission proved to be particularly costly for us. 360 TV is about $1.4 million on an annual basis to operate, and Galveston, Alaska is over $1 million of that 1.4. And for a little bit of context there, in last year, KTOO provided 920 hours of legislative coverage through Galveston, Alaska, and all of that requires a human touch. And even though we've created great efficiencies through robocams in the Capitol building, we have a direct fiber connection between KTOO and the Capitol. We don't always have to send, someone with a camera and with a microphone to every single thing that happens. We still need people in the control room. We still need technicians. We still need engineers. And that is something that we receive no state funding for. So there's a common misconception that there's some state funding for Galveston, Alaska. And while we do work very closely with the folks in legislative affairs, we receive $0 from the state of Alaska for the production of Galveston, Alaska. Prior to rescission, our budget was about $3.4 million on an annual basis. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting provided $1.2 million of that $3.4. So the cut to KTOO in Juneau is about 34% of our operating budget. And for a little further context, last year was a milestone. It's the first year we raised over $500,000 from individuals in our community. So, based on our geographic limitations, it's going to be very difficult for us to make up that full $1.2 million. And I think to provide further context as we look at decisions that need to be made, since the loss of state funding, I think 7 years ago now, we've already endured a fairly significant reduction in force. At one point, this organization was over 30 full-time employees. Coming into fiscal 26, we were 22. And at this point, we're 20. One of the decisions we made following rescission was to eliminate our 2 open positions. With that, we're doing everything in our power to avoid layoffs at this moment. We run so lean that at this point, laying off any one individual is going to be really damning to programs. And subsequently, we've made some other changes. If you were tuned in at all for what wound up being a very short special session this summer, we had to furlough all of our temporary staff, so you didn't see the same level of quality that you typically would see in terms of the graphics, the captioning, all of the things that an actual human body needs to provide for that service. And got a couple notes here, so bear with me. The other thing we instituted was a hiring freeze. We have made an exception to that freeze, given that our managing editor has just taken a role as editor-in-chief at the Alaska Beacon, something of which we're very happy for Claire, but also the strategic significance of that position outweighs any short-term cost reduction. And it also want to make it very clear to everyone on this call that news continues to be an unwavering commitment at KTOO Public Media. And despite all these challenges, our priorities remain constant. We're going to continue to work with our partners to chart a new course. As Gretchen mentioned, there is, every single GM in the state is meeting on a weekly basis. There's another group that's meeting on a bi-weekly basis. And I'm also very excited about some of the opportunities we have through the Bridge Fund, a public media company, and then, of course, working with our partners at the Alaska Community Foundation to set up and see an amazing $3.5 million of giving already to the Voices Across Alaska Fund. Finally, my parting thought is just a big thank you to everyone in Juneau who may be on this call. The community response has truly been overwhelming. This is, you've heard it from others, and I just want to echo that sentiment. While 1.2 million is a lot, a big hole for us at 34% of our budget, we have raised since July 1 over $400,000 from individuals in our community already. And to bring back that point of context, last year we had a celebration because we crossed the $500,000 mark for the entire fiscal year. So we're very fortunate to be in Juneau. We're very fortunate to have people stepping up in some very big ways. But ultimately, we still have some very big concerns to address as a network and need to make sure that especially our peers in rural Alaska are able to maintain their commitment to local news and service. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Justin. Ed, I think that it would be a really great opportunity for you to explain a little bit more about the Voices Across Alaska Fund at the Alaska Community Foundation.
Yeah, the purpose of that fund initially, we had Gretchen guests from the Rasmussen Foundation, Alex McKay, reach out and talk to us about what if we could create a central fund where foundations and corporations here in Alaska, but also outside Alaska, could give. And we were literally meeting on the next Monday after the rescission vote as station leaders across the state. Molly Kabler from Coast Alaska helped organize us. And because of our collaborative nature, we came up with 5 really important principles. And the number one most important principle to me is that every single public television and radio station will have a leader at the table representing your communities as we figure out what the future will hold for public television and radio in Alaska. And that we needed this bridge funding to ensure that every voice in Alaska is at the table to determine what's the right future. But at the same time, we also recognize that we're essential. And there was one commenter, I think I'm going to answer a question really quickly about this notion that everybody streams. I showed you the ARCS Mac because the reality is not everybody streams. Alaska Public Media, our KAKM station, is the #2 most watched television station here in the Anchorage Matsu market. We regularly pull in over 160,000 viewers out of the potential 400,000 or so that can get our free over-the-air signal. And there are a lot of people out there who just don't have the capacity to give, but they want to tune in and be informed, and they want to see the programming, especially children's educational programming that PBS does in a way that no one else across the country does. And that's why it was so quick and so fast for all of these funders in the state who've been supporting us over the years to come together in a big way to create the Voices Across Alaska Fund. The majority of folks that know what we do know its impact and how important it is. And that's why we came together so quickly. Literally within 4 weeks, we had that fund announced, and the teams at all the foundations started working on that, including other great friends of public broadcasting, many of you who know those folks. I don't want to point out names because some folks just like to do this work quietly. But we have a lot of friends out there. And I think that there's a real powerful opportunity for us, because when you think about just Alaska Public Media and KAKM, about 160,000 people give. Well, our goal is 15,000 members now. We just finally hit 11,930 members as of a couple of days ago. But we're reaching a lot more households, especially on the television side. And that's why we're so appreciative of Paula coming here and explaining how this works. If we saw more television donors support what we do, we would be able to continue to provide the service. It's really about taking that opportunity. And I know that we're going to have some opportunities for you, if you've yet to give, to make a donation. We're really looking to acquire more members. And a commitment to the Voices Across Alaska Fund, if that's what you choose, is a commitment to the entire public media ecosystem here in Alaska. And by the way, we have the only statewide news operation. You heard Justin say it. News is central to what we do. We're Alaska's voice. You see news stories on PBS NewsHour. You hear Alaska news stories on NPR. This is essential, and we're committed to doing this work. And we're going to just keep asking our community to support us until we're where we need to be. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. I think Spencer is going to help us with some questions.
Yes, and let me get the graphic up here as well. There we go. All right. So we've had several questions come through. Let's start back here. I think Mark was first. And his question was, do you think the end game is potentially the commercialization of licenses held in the public broadcasting space? Is there any indication that the FCC might move to revoke licenses or force stations to go off the air? Which, pretty heavy question. I think it is worth asking these days.
Yeah, I mean, I can try to field that. Ed, you can come behind if you want. I mean, I think, look, if you look at at what it would take to try to seize a non-commercial license and convert it into commercial license, or perhaps more likely selling the spectrum, it's up until now, it has been a pretty onerous process to, remove a license. You have to show significant negligence. So a lot of people have asked this question, is that the end game? Part of the reason I think people have asked the question is the very first action against public media at the beginning of the year was actually Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, who sent a letter very early on and said and had questions about our underwriting spots, and said that if public television and public radio were running commercials, that he would ask that our license, that our funding be removed. He didn't talk about the licenses. Look, there's been a lot of activity within this FCC around commercial broadcast organizations as well. So I think I'm going to be careful in answering this question, because I've learned not to speak definitively about anything in this moment. But I do think of all the things to worry about. This is not the one that is keeping me up at night at this moment. So if that gives you any comfort, so be it. But I think we all just need to pay attention to the actions of the FCC, and particularly as stations' licenses come up for renewal, which they do on a periodic basis. But I haven't seen any evidence yet of any real effort to try to seize licenses and use them for other purposes.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that here in Alaska, we just don't have the congestion that they have in larger communities, right? Right now, Gretchen is the only broadcast television organization in the Fairbanks region. And all the other folks, they have their services there, but there's no local presence at all. And certainly the case for Kristen and for Justin. So the reality is that there's plenty of spectrum for all of us to continue doing what we need to do. And we all are making sure that we're compliant with the highly regulated expectations, both the FCC, the FAA, and CPB was required to ensure that stations work in compliance with. So to Paula's point, I think this is not keeping me up at night.
Great, thank you. Next up, let's go with Kathy, who asks, it's great that so much money has been raised since the rescission, but is it sustainable? Were the fall funding drives cannibalized? And in 2026, will the public still care?
Let me jump in on that really quick. It's a great question, because I actually posed that as we were looking almost every 2 or 3 days at what we were bringing in for our first tranche of fundraising right after the rescission vote. A lot of this is new money. A lot of these are new donors. We were at around 10,800 or so donors. We're now over 11,900 here with Alaska Public Media. We've taken a look at where the ad gifts were, where major donors stepped up. We pulled that away, and we're pretty confident in looking at our numbers that about 70% of what we've raised during the short period of time is new funding that's sustainable. Now it's a bigger lift, but we have a full year, at least for Alaska Public Media, to work on that, and we're just going to keep working towards that. The thing about what I think that we can do is analyze when and where, and then communicate what it is we do when people become sustainers. And remember, Gretchen and at KUAC and Alaska Public Media, we have this beautiful, powerful thing called Passport, where people can become a member and then watch all of the incredible PBS programming on demand as well. So we're reaching digital viewers in addition to our over-the-air viewers with all of the services that PBS provides. And I think this is another important piece. We cannot do what we do without PBS and all the incredible work that stations across the whole system do. And that's why I think people find value. And I think that we're going to be able to convince a lot of people to step up. Now, will we reach the whole amount? I don't know. I can't tell you that, but we're not going to give up.
Thank you, Ed. Barton asks, do we have any feedback from the national populace pushing back on the rescission? What are the prospects for new legislations to approve funding for NPR and PBS? And are Congress or the Senate feeling any heat from their constituents over their votes? to rescind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know that there has been in some of the town halls that have happened around the country, those that are doing town halls. I know that following the rescission, there was a lot of communication back up on the Hill about disappointment in the decision. And I also know that there have been a lot of ongoing conversations with legislators about where do we go from here. In fact, next week, I'm meeting with a senator who actually is retiring, who wanted to talk to me immediately after the vote about what might be done going forward. I think we, in my opinion, again, that we should continue the conversations and really press forward. I think it was very clear to me coming off of the votes that there were a number of people that voted to rescind funding, but that weren't really clear that that was going to impact their local stations. I know that sounds really strange to say, but I have been in conversations with several members who didn't fully appreciate what the impact would be. So I do think there is an opportunity here to make sure that we are clear that all of this great fundraising that's underway isn't an immediate answer to this problem. We are working all together to close the gap. The question about is it sustainable will be the significant question. You know, it's interesting when you work in public media. I know a lot of people do watch us over the air. A lot of people watch us streamed. There is the PBS app. We're on YouTube TV. There are lots of ways that you can see your local public PBS station, not just over the air or cable or satellite, but streamed in other places. And I think people don't always realize that, you know, all of this is possible literally because of viewers like you. And they also made the assumption that that we were just completely government funded. And I think this has gotten a lot of people's attention. And I think it will be up to all of us to see what that new level will be. Now, after any crisis, you always have an immediate flurry of response. But I believe that we will reset the bar much higher with the number of people and communities that are supporting public media. And then we see where we take it from there.
I'd also like to just mention that I think it's important that that our viewers tonight and our viewers throughout our communities and our listeners understand that if you're in Anchorage or another locale that has more access to internet connectivity, that can be an argument that, oh yes, you can watch it over the air. But I've had multiple conversations this week with people who live literally 4 miles away from the university and do not have access to broadband. So they cannot stream. The only way that they can get us is by turning us on over the air. And so I think that our lawmakers need to understand that a little better. And also our system needs to understand that, because the streaming is not going to be the answer until interior Alaska and Bethel, the YK Delta, gets actual high-speed internet.
Thank you for that. I'm going to, we have a couple of questions queued up here, but to kind of consolidate a few of them together here, we have a question from Vicky and Kathy and Clark that I'm going to put together. Vicky in particular is a board member of KRBD and a board member on Coastal Alaska. And she says, I have a vested interest in ensuring our public media infrastructure in Alaska continues to exist. However, for stations such as KRBD, we have nothing left to cut. We've seen a tremendous outpouring of support from our listeners, but losing our CPB funding long-term puts the station's existence in jeopardy. On a statewide level, have ideas been generated on how to continue providing crucial services to rural Alaskans? Because that's been the recurring thread of these questions. Urban areas, we have a lot of people to draw from, a lot of people to ask, but for places like Bethel, like Shishmaref, like Coldfoot, it's not as much of an option.
I'm happy to answer, but I want to give time to Justin or Kristen or Gretchen first.
I can hop in on that. I mean, I can hop in on that. There's no definitive solutions, but I would say that that is a primary focus of coming together on a weekly basis. We're talking a lot about shared services, and for those of you, and a question coming from KRBD and a Coastal Alaska board member, you certainly know the ins and outs of shared services. And I think we're looking at ways in which, whether it's coast or just we operate this independently. I don't know yet, but there's conversation about shared operations and just all kinds of ways we might create more shared efficiencies across the system that would allow us to continue to serve our communities without losing, those boots on the ground in news and really providing the information from our communities to our communities. So I think that's the first place we're looking, at least for my part, and I would love to hear what others have to say.
One of the keys has to be state funding being returned. And I think it's not lost on many of us that the legislature has every single year put in funding, in particular for rural public radio. We've made this request every single year. KUAC, KTOO, Kiwanis, and Alaska Public Media have said, look, we don't need state funding. We figured out how to manage without it, but rural radio stations need it. And the legislature puts it back in every year. And yet there's one individual who has the power of the veto, who exercises that veto and goes against, and I'm just going to say it, the will of the people. And so the real solution is for more of us to communicate and get our friends to communicate about the value that we see in these amazing public-private partnerships that are designed to work as efficiently as possible, to get more bang for the buck out of each donor dollar and each state revenue and federal tax dollar.
Thank you for that. I will, we have a pair of questions actually, so I'm going to consolidate them together from Iris and Brenda. Dan Sullivan mentioned after the rescission that there was funding secured for, quote, tribal stations. What is the status of that funding stream?
I can answer what I've read, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs has indicated that they're going to be administering the funds. So it does appear there were a number of questions that, there were a number of promises that were made at the 11th hour in both the House vote and the Senate vote. And this does appear to be the one that at least there is some intent to make whole. And in addition to the money flowing through BIA, there has been some discussion of where those funds would actually come from. So it feels like it's real, but with everything else, I think we need to make sure that those promises are kept. Meanwhile, I'll say that the funders, particularly some of the funders that have already given money into the Bridge Fund, are very much paying attention to those stations in particular. And I would also say, coming back to Carrie's question about the infrastructure, I think there are a lot of people that are watching this. And so I agree with Ed. I think trying to hold the state to account is important, but I think there are others from outside of the state that are just very, very concerned and interested in making sure that infrastructure is maintained.
Excellent. I'll go ahead and throw in this a little bit more contentious one here. Since the major complaint about PBS among the current federal administration seems to be the liberal bias of the news, has there been any discussion of separating the news division from the other programming in hopes of reinstating federal funds?
I think that as we have seen in other debates around trying to hold on to funding in other circumstances in recent history, that hasn't worked out well. And I think when media companies have made concessions around different things, then more things are requested. I also think it's the beginning of a slippery slope. If you say that, well, I won't fund news. Well, what exactly is no news? I won't fund information. I don't like this or I don't like that. When public broadcasting was created, it was created very specifically with what I think at the time they thought were protections. One, there was the 2-year advance. I don't think anyone thought that someone would try to come in and pull that money away that had already been appropriated by bipartisan effort of Congress. And then the second part was creating the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which was a firewall between the investment of the government and media. You know, if you look around the world at particularly at other democracies, I think now we may be the only one that does not receive government funding. Don't take that as fact. But most public media around the country, around the world, excuse me, is funded for a purpose because it's deemed as a public good, and certainly news is deemed as a public good. So we have not entertained any real effort to try to pull out news. Again, that would convey to your local news services, which I think is something that's pretty important and significant to what, particularly in the radio side, you're delivering. So I don't see that as a real solution, but believe me, a lot of people thought about a lot of different ideas of what possibly could be done to hold on to federal funding, but that doesn't seem like that would actually come to the outcome that we would hope.
Okay, we have time for one more question here. Paula is on East Coast time and has graciously stayed up with us to answer questions and be here. I think, Ed, you had raised your hand to answer this last question. Will there be an effort to endow the Voices Across Alaska Fund?
Yeah, I think it's too early to say right now. Our partners at Alaska Community Foundation have been phenomenal. Alaska Public Media has a small start to our endowment there. They're a natural place to do that. But right now it's about the bridge funding. It's about ensuring, as I said, that all station leaders are at the table to represent their communities, the people they serve, and that we can work together for the most equitable system moving forward. And also because we're still going to continue to go after federal funding, we're still going to go after state funding as well. So we're not giving up on these things. So there's going to be a time where we have to make some hard choices. You've heard already how many of us have made some hard choices, but we're doing this work together and in partnership. And so down the road, an endowment concept is a great idea. Thank you for sharing that and for getting us to think about it as well. I guess I would end with one last thing. The power of our network in Alaska. I've been here for a little over 9 years. Grew up in the Northwest. Grew up on OPB in the Portland, Oregon area. The power of our network is that we're independent, and there are 27 locally owned and operated public media organizations, and we've all seen Alaska overlaid on the lower 48. Geographically, our network makes perfect sense. There's no one way we can do this from a central point, and it would diminish the service that our 4 services already provide, hyper-localized services. That's what public broadcasting is all about. And you heard a small sampling of the incredible programming that we all do. It's impressive what all of our public media sister stations across the state do. And then we aggregate it and combine it and we share it with the rest of the world. it's worth it.
All right.
Go on that note. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all our panelists for making time, Paula in particular, but Justin, Kristen, Ed, Gretchen, for being here and keeping the public up to date. This video will be recorded and provided to all participating Alaska stations so that they can have it uploaded to YouTube or their online video service of choice. But thank you all for attending.
Thank you.